The sun was setting over the distant planet of Ethar, casting long shadows across the wreckage of a once proud alien ship. The crash had been violent, its towering metal frame now crumpled against the rocky terrain, smoking faintly as the wind swept across the barren landscape. Inside the twisted wreckage, a young alien princess, Zartra, lay unconscious. Her once vibrant skin, now pale and bruised, reflected the horrors of the crash. Zartra had been on a diplomatic mission for her mother Velnara, the queen of the Zarthek people. Her ship, a sleek silver craft designed for speed, had been struck by an unknown force during its descent to the human colony below. The young princess, skilled in navigating the stars but inexperienced in survival, had no choice but to crash land. Alone, injured, and drifting in and out of consciousness, Zartra could do nothing but wait. She was far from her people, in a world that wasn't hers. The humans, though not a warlike race, were nothing like her own kind. They were resilient, unpredictable, and unfamiliar. Her species had always believed that humans were weak, easily controlled, but Zartra had learned quickly that her assumptions were wrong. Now, as she lay motionless in the wreckage, she was at their mercy. Meanwhile, Ethan, a human mechanic living on the colony, had heard the crash. He was working on his routine maintenance in his garage when the rumble of the explosion reached his ears. It was a familiar sound. He had seen enough wrecks in his time to recognize the aftermath of a crash. Dropping his tools, he rushed outside. The sky was painted in shades of red and orange, and in the distance, smoke billowed from the downed craft. With no time to waste, Ethan sprinted toward the wreck. He wasn't part of any rescue team. In fact, he hadn't even known there was a rescue team. He was just a mechanic, a regular guy, but something about the crash tugged at him. He had heard stories of alien ships before, stories of creatures who were far superior to humans. But this was different. This was real. When he reached the wreckage, Ethan was careful. The ship was enormous, its metal exterior twisted and charred from the force of the crash. There was no telling what kind of technology lay within, but he knew he had to do something. As he crawled through the narrow openings of the craft, he felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just a routine repair. Someone had been in this ship, someone who might need help. Inside, amid the scorched panels and shattered glass, Ethan found her. The princess lay unconscious, her breathing shallow, but still alive. Her limbs were twisted at odd angles, and blood stained her clothes. "Hey! Hey!" Ethan called, crouching beside her, his voice trembling slightly as he placed a hand on her forehead. It was cool, too cool. She was on the verge of dying. Without thinking, he acted. Ethan wasn't a medical expert, but he knew enough to bandage wounds and treat basic injuries. Using the first aid kit from his pack, he managed to stabilize her. Her breathing became less labored, but she still didn't wake. He wasn't sure how long she had been out, but time was running short. He had no way of knowing what had caused the crash or what kind of enemies might be after her. He only knew that her survival was now in his hands. As the night settled in, Ethan built a small fire near the wreckage and kept watch over her. His thoughts raced. What was she doing here? Was she a scout, an ambassador, an invader? The possibilities raced through his mind, but one thing was clear. She was in no condition to defend herself. She wasn't some alien conqueror. She was just a young woman who needed help. As the stars twinkled above, the sound of her soft breathing filled the air. Ethan sat back, his mind still swirling with questions. But there was something else, too. Something that told him to help. He couldn't explain it, but he had a sense of responsibility. He was a mechanic, not a hero, but for some reason, he couldn't turn his back on this alien princess. She was vulnerable, and he was the only one who could help her. At that moment, a strange, silent understanding passed between them. Ethan knew that the next few days would change everything. His world, His understanding of who and what he was would never be the same. The alien princess, Zartra, would awake soon, and when she did, there was no telling what would happen. Would she see him as a friend, a foe, or something else entirely? Only time would tell. But for now, there was nothing he could do except wait. And in the silence of the night, he hoped that when she woke, she would remember the one human who had saved her, no matter what came next. Ethan sat by the fire, staring at the wreckage of the alien ship as the night crept on. The stars above twinkled brightly as if unaware of the chaos unfolding below. He couldn't stop thinking about the princess. Who was she? What was she doing here? More importantly, why had she been alone? He tried to push the questions aside, but they kept coming back, swirling in his mind like a storm. The fire crackled, breaking the silence. He glanced over at the young alien, Zartra, who lay unconscious beside him. Her breathing had steadied, but she still hadn't woken up. Ethan's hands were dirty from the repairs he had done, but he didn't mind. He couldn't help but feel a strange connection to her. He had saved her life, sure, but it was more than that. There was something about her, something that made him want to protect her, even though he didn't know why. As the night grew colder, he moved closer to the fire, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. He had no idea what he was doing here, in this alien wreck, looking after someone who didn't belong to his world. But there was no turning back now. Zartra was alive, and that was thanks to him. He would just have to deal with whatever came next. The hours stretched on, and just as Ethan was starting to drift off to sleep, he heard a faint noise. It was soft at first, barely audible over the crackling of the fire, but it was enough to snap him awake. He turned toward the princess. She was stirring. Zartra's eyes fluttered open, her pupils dilated as they adjusted to the dim light. She looked around, her gaze darting from the fire to Ethan. Her expression was one of confusion, panic even, as she realized where she was. She tried to move, but her body was too weak. Her injuries had left her drained, and she collapsed back. Onto the ground, her breath shallow, Ethan quickly got up and moved toward her. "Hey, easy there. Don't try to move too much," he said gently, crouching beside her. His voice was calm, though his heart was racing. He wasn't sure what to expect. Would she attack him? Was she going to demand answers? Zartra's eyes locked onto his, a flicker of fear passing through them. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice was weak. Where am I?" Her words were soft, almost like she hadn't spoken in a long time. "You're safe," Ethan said, his voice reassuring. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to explain. She didn't know who he was, or where she was, or how much trouble they were both in. But there was no point in hiding the truth. "You crashed here. Your ship didn't make it. But I've been helping you." Zartra's eyes narrowed slightly. "You saved me?" she asked, disbelief evident in her voice. "But why? Why would you help me?" Ethan shrugged. "You were hurt. You needed help. It's what anyone would do." Zartra studied him for a long moment, trying to make sense of his words. Her people had always believed that humans were weak, that they couldn't be trusted. They were primitive, they said, easy to control. But this human, Ethan, was different. He had saved her, despite knowing she wasn't from his world, despite everything that could go wrong. "I don't understand," Zartra whispered, her voice still shaky. She closed her eyes, trying to gather her strength. "My people. They would never do this. They would never help someone like me." "Well, I'm not like your people," Ethan replied with a half-smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I guess that's why I helped." Zartra fell silent, processing his words. Her head was spinning. She had always been taught to see humans as nothing more than weak, easily controlled creatures. Yet here she was, lying in front of one, and he had saved her life. There was no malice in his eyes, no trickery in his voice. He was simply trying to help her, even though he didn't understand the full extent of the situation. As the moments passed, Zartra's body slowly began to regain some strength. The pain in her limbs was still there, but it was less intense than before. She could feel her energy returning, though she didn't know how much time she had left before the rest of her people came searching for her. The longer she stayed here, the more dangerous it would be for both of them. "I have to go," Zartra said suddenly, her voice firm. She tried to push herself up, but Ethan stopped her. "No, you're in no condition to move yet," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You need rest. You're not going anywhere until I'm sure you're okay." Zartra hesitated. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. If she stayed here, she would be putting Ethan in danger. But if she left, she risked dying alone without anyone to help her. She looked at Ethan again, his face kind but resolute, and she realized something. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel completely alone. She didn't feel like a stranger in this world. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled gently, a sense of relief washing over him. "You're welcome." "Jay?" "Yes, rest now. We'll figure everything out." As the night carried on, Zartra drifted back into a peaceful sleep, the warmth of the fire providing comfort she hadn't expected. Ethan stayed by her side, watching over her, his thoughts filled with questions and uncertainties. But one thing was clear. This was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could have imagined. The following day, Zartra woke to find the fire still crackling, the sky above now a clear blue with only a few wisps of cloud drifting lazily by. Ethan had built up the fire again and was sitting nearby, working on some tools. He had been busy during the night, though Zartra had no idea how much time had passed since she had fallen asleep. She felt stronger, the pain in her limbs lessened, but still there. The fact that she was still alive was a miracle. Her ship had been badly damaged in the crash, and the chances of survival for someone in her condition seemed slim. Yet here she was, alive and breathing with the strange human beside her, looking at her with quiet concern. Ethan looked up as she stirred. He had seen her wake before, but this time was different. There was something in her eyes, something that hinted at understanding, even a little gratitude. It made him feel a strange sense of pride, though he wasn't sure why. It wasn't like he had done anything extraordinary. He had just helped a stranger who needed it. "You're awake," Ethan said, standing up slowly and stretching his arms. "How are you feeling?" Zartra took a deep breath, testing her body. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. "Better," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you." Ethan smiled. "No need to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone would do." But there was something more to it than that. Ethan knew it. He had never been one to turn his back on someone in need, but this felt different. He was helping her, yes, but it was more than that. There was a bond forming between them, one that neither of them fully understood. She watched him for a moment, trying to understand him. He wasn't like her people had said humans were. He wasn't weak. He wasn't a conqueror either. He was simply a man, one who had made a choice to help when he didn't have to. Zartra had always been taught that humans were simple, their emotions shallow, easy to manipulate. But here, sitting beside her, Ethan was proving that wrong. He wasn't manipulating her. He wasn't trying to use her. He was just helping. "I'm sorry for my people's ways," Zartra said after a long silence, her voice almost hesitant. "They would not have treated you kindly if they knew you were helping me." Ethan frowned, not quite understanding. "What do you mean?" "They think humans are weak," Zartra said, struggling to find the right words. "They believe you are easy to control, easy to destroy." I was taught that humans are not worth the time. Ethan stood silent for a moment, taking in what she said. Well, I can't speak for all humans, he said finally. But I know we're not weak. We have our flaws, sure. But we're not weak, and we're not easy to control. Zartra looked at him, her golden eyes studying him carefully. She had never met a human before, but now, with Ethan sitting here beside her, everything she had been taught was being called into question. This was not what she had expected. She had expected someone who would be terrified of her, someone who would cower in fear. But Ethan wasn't afraid. He wasn't even intimidated. He was calm and steady, someone who had made the choice to help. Her, even when he had no reason to. I was wrong, she said quietly. I thought you were just another weak race, but you're different. Ethan shrugged, trying to hide the sudden rush of pride he felt. I don't know if I'm any different from anyone else, but I do know that no one deserves to be left for dead. For a moment, they both sat in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Zartra had no idea what would happen next. She was far from her people, stranded on a planet that was not her own. She was alone, with no one to protect her except this human. She didn't know if she could trust him completely, but something inside her told her she could, and that terrified her. I have to leave soon, Zartra said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's face softened. You're not well enough to move yet. You need to rest. I can't stay here forever, she said, her tone more forceful now. My people will be coming for me. I can't let them find you. They won't be as kind as I was. Ethan understood. Zartra had to leave. It was only a matter of time before her people came looking for her, and when they did, he didn't want to be anywhere near them. But he couldn't help but feel a sense of dread at the thought of her leaving. He had never planned for any of this, never thought he would end up here, looking after an alien princess. But the thought of her going, of being alone again, didn't sit right with him. I don't want you to go, Ethan said quietly, almost to himself. Zartra turned to him, her expression unreadable. You don't have a choice. I know, he said. But I still don't want you to go. Zartra looked away, a conflicted expression crossing her face. She had come to this planet to complete her mission, but now she didn't know what to think. She had been taught that humans were a race to be feared, to be controlled. But Ethan had shown her something different, and it left her with more questions than answers. After a long silence, Zartra finally spoke again. I will leave when I am strong enough, but I won't forget your kindness, human. Ethan smiled, a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. You don't have to. Just take care of yourself. As the day went on, Zartra grew stronger. But deep down, she knew the time to leave was coming soon. And when it did, she would have to face the reality of her people and the consequences of everything that had happened. But they no longer overwhelmed her. Her body ached, but the pain had become something she could manage. Still, she knew that time was running out. The longer she stayed, the more dangerous it would be for Ethan. Her people, the Zarthek, were coming. She had no idea how long it would take for them to reach this planet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. She looked at Ethan, who was busy tending to the remains of her ship. He had been working tirelessly, trying to repair it, to get it ready for when she left. But every time she looked at him, she felt a strange pull. He wasn't like the humans she had been taught about. He wasn't like the others. There was something different about him, something she couldn't quite understand. Ethan glanced up from his work, wiping sweat from his brow as he noticed Zartra standing. He smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. You're up and about, he said, his voice light but with a touch of worry. How are you feeling? Better, Zartra replied, her voice soft but steady. But I can't stay here much longer. Ethan nodded, understanding. He had known this moment was coming. He had hoped, at least for a while, that things might be different. But he knew that her people would come for her. They had to. I get it, he said quietly. But I wish things were different. I wish we had more time. Zartra looked at him for a moment, studying his face. He wasn't angry or resentful. He wasn't afraid either. He was just sad. Sad because he knew what was coming, just as she did. I can't promise you anything, she said after a pause. But I can promise that I'll remember everything you've done for me. I won't forget. Ethan smiled, though the sadness remained in his eyes. You don't have to promise me anything, just take care of yourself. That's all I want. For a moment, they simply stood there in silence, the weight of their unspoken words hanging in the air. Zartra felt her heart heavy with the realization that she would soon be leaving the one person who had shown her kindness in a world that she had never truly understood. But she had no choice. Her people would not accept weakness. They would not accept her failure. I have to go, Zartra said quietly, breaking the silence. I'm not strong enough to fight them, but I have to try. Ethan didn't say anything at first. He just nodded, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he couldn't change the course of what was happening. I know, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But if you need anything at all, I'll be here. Zartra turned toward the wreckage of her ship, her thoughts clouded with doubt. Could she make it back? Could she survive long enough to reach her people before they gave up on her? She didn't know, but she had to try. With a deep breath, Zartra started to walk toward the ship. Her steps were slow but steady, each one carrying her farther from the safety Ethan had offered her. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She had to leave. But as she neared the wreckage, she stopped. Something inside her hesitated. She didn't know what it was, but she felt it. She had always been taught to think of herself first, to put her people above all else. But in that moment, as she looked at Ethan standing there behind her, she realized that there was something more to life than duty. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can go back to them. I don't know if I can live with what they'll make me do. Ethan's eyes softened, his face filled with sympathy. You don't have to go back if you don't want to, he said gently. You don't have to go back to anyone who would make you feel like that. Zartra turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. But my people will never accept me if I don't return. They'll punish me for failing. I'll be nothing. Ethan shook his head, his voice firm. You're not nothing. You're not a failure. And you don't have to live by anyone else's rules. You have the power to choose what you want. Zartra stared at him, her mind racing. She had never considered the possibility of choosing her own path. She had always followed. The expectations placed on her always been the perfect princess, the perfect daughter, the perfect warrior. But now, standing in front of this human, she felt something stir within her, a desire for freedom, a desire to choose her own future. I don't know if I'm ready for that, she said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. I don't know if I can just walk away from everything I've known. Ethan took a step closer to her, his expression kind but serious. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, but just remember, you're not alone. You have a choice, and I'll help you make it, no matter what you decide. Zartra felt a surge of emotion rise within her, her heart aching as she realized the truth of his words. She wasn't alone. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to make her believe that she could do this. She took a deep breath and looked back at the wreckage of her ship. The future, whatever it held, was uncertain. But one thing was clear. She didn't have to face it alone, and for the first time, Zartra wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew she had a choice. And that was the first step toward something new. The days passed slowly as Zartra and Ethan spent their time together in the small clearing near the wreckage. The ship still lay in ruins, its delicate systems beyond repair. Yet neither of them could fully accept the idea that she would leave so soon. Zartra had begun to recover, her strength returning little by little, though her thoughts were more uncertain than ever. She could feel the weight of her responsibilities pressing on her chest, but there was also something else, something she hadn't expected, a growing sense of attachment, a bond with Ethan that she couldn't ignore. Ethan had been patient, offering her space when she needed it, but always close when she needed him. He never pushed her to make decisions she wasn't ready for, and that gave her more comfort than she would have ever expected from a human. As much as Zartra feared what would happen when she faced her people again, she found it hard to imagine leaving him behind. But the truth was undeniable. She had to go. Her people would come for her, whether she was ready or not. One evening, as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, Zartra sat near the fire, staring into the flames. Ethan had gone out to gather some firewood, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She tried to push them aside, but the thought of returning to her people, of facing her mother, filled her with dread. There was no telling what punishment awaited her for failing her mission. The thought of it was unbearable. When Ethan returned, he noticed the distant look in her eyes. He had grown used to her silence, but tonight it seemed different. There was something heavier about it, a sense of finality. "You're quiet tonight," Ethan said softly, setting the pile of firewood down beside the fire. Zartra didn't look at him immediately. Instead, she stared into the fire, her face drawn. "I've been thinking." Ethan sat down next to her, his gaze never leaving her. "About? I don't know if I can go back," she said quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can face them." Ethan was silent for a moment, giving her time to find the right words. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and understanding. "You don't have to go back if you don't want to." Zartra turned to look at him, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "I don't know what else to do," she admitted. "I've spent my whole life training for this. For my people, for my mother, and now I'm not sure who I am anymore. I can't just throw everything away." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. "You don't have to throw anything away," he said, "but you don't have to follow the path they've set for you either. You can choose your own way. It's your life, Zartra. You don't have to let anyone else decide for you." Her heart clenched at his words. Could it really be that simple? Could she choose a life for herself, free from the expectations of her people, free from the duty that had been drilled into her since birth? Zartra had always been told that her purpose was to serve her people, to lead them, to be the perfect daughter of the queen. But here, with Ethan, she had felt something she had never known before, a sense of freedom, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could decide her own fate. "I'm afraid," she whispered, the admission coming out as a fragile breath. "I'm afraid of what will happen if I choose my own path. I don't know what my people will do. I don't know if I can survive without them." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "You've already survived without them, Zartra. You're still here. You've made it this far. You don't need anyone else to define you. You're strong, more than you know." The words hung in the air, filling the space between them with a quiet kind of understanding. Zartra felt a small knot of hope form in her chest, though she was still unsure. She had never been allowed to question the path laid out for her, but now, with Ethan's encouragement, she felt the walls that had confined her begin to crack. Maybe I could stay here, she said softly, the idea tentative, but growing. Maybe I could find a way to live without all the rules, without the expectations. But I'm scared, Ethan. What if I'm wrong? What if I fail again? Ethan reached out and placed a hand gently on hers. You won't fail. Not as long as you choose your own path. You'll never know unless you try. Zartra felt the warmth of his touch seep into her skin, a feeling of comfort that she hadn't realized she needed. She had always been taught that emotions like this, trust, kindness, compassion, were weaknesses. Yet, sitting here beside Ethan, she realized how wrong that teaching had been. These feelings made her stronger, not weaker. They gave her the courage to face the unknown. The fire crackled beside them, casting a warm glow on their faces as they sat in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. For a moment it felt as though the rest of the world had disappeared, leaving only the two of them, suspended in time. Zartra finally spoke again, her voice steadier than before. I don't know what the future holds, but maybe it's time I stop running from it. Maybe it's time I choose for myself. Ethan smiled, the warmth in his eyes spreading to his entire face. Whatever you decide, I'll be here. Zartra nodded, her heart light with the realization that, for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. The days were passing more quickly now. Zartra had made her decision. The idea of going back to her people, of facing the consequences of her failure, seemed less and less appealing. Each time she looked at Ethan, she felt a little stronger, a little more certain that she was making the right choice. He had given her something she had never known, freedom. And she was learning slowly that she didn't have to follow the path others had laid out for her. Still, there was one truth she couldn't escape. Her people were coming. It was only a matter of time before her mother, the queen, sent a search party to find her. Zartra didn't know what would happen then. Would they try to force her back? Would they punish her for failing in her mission? She didn't know. The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she couldn't keep running forever. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Zartra and Ethan were sitting by the fire, talking quietly. The air was thick with the sound of crickets and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees. For a moment, everything felt peaceful, as if the world outside didn't exist. But deep down, Zartra knew that peace couldn't last forever. Ethan noticed the faraway look in her eyes, the same look she had worn for the past few days. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently, his voice low but warm. Zartra sighed, leaning back against a tree. "I keep thinking about what's coming," she said quietly. "My people. They will come for me. I don't know what they'll do when they find me. They won't let me go so easily." Ethan was silent for a moment, looking at her with concern. "You don't have to face them alone," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not going to leave you." Zartra turned to him, her golden eyes, reflecting the firelight. "I know you won't," she said softly. "But what happens when they come? What will you do?" Ethan's expression hardened, though he didn't look away. "I'll protect you, whatever it takes." Her heart fluttered at his words, and she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had never imagined that a human could care so much, that someone from a completely different world would be willing to risk everything for her. But Ethan had proven that he wasn't like anyone she had ever known. He wasn't just helping her because it was the right thing to do. He was doing it because he genuinely cared. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me," Zartra said, her voice full of emotion. "I don't want anyone to suffer because of my choices." Ethan shook his head, his jaw set. You don't get to decide that. If they come for you, they're coming for both of us. And I won't let anything happen to you." Zartra looked away, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know what to feel anymore. Part of her wanted to stay with Ethan, to carve out a new life for herself, far away from the world that had always expected so much from her. But another part of her knew that her people would never accept her decision. They would see it as a betrayal, and there would be consequences. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear. "Maybe I should just leave," Zartra said suddenly, her voice tight. "Maybe it's better if I go on my own. That way you won't have to be involved in all of this." Ethan stared at her, disbelief crossing his face. "What? No. You're not going anywhere alone. I'm not going to let you just disappear." Zartra met his gaze, her eyes fierce. "I can't keep dragging you into this. I don't know what's going to happen, but I can't put you at risk." Ethan's expression softened, and he leaned forward, his voice steady. "Zartra, you don't get it. I'm already involved. You don't have to protect me from what's coming. I made my choice the moment I helped you. We face this together, or not at all." Zartra felt her heart swell at his words. She had always been taught that strength meant standing alone, that true power came from being able to face the world without anyone else. But here, with Ethan, she realized that she didn't have to be alone. She didn't have to carry the burden of everything on her shoulders. "You really mean that?" she asked, her voice soft but full of hope. Ethan nodded without hesitation. "Of course I do. Whatever happens, we face it together. You're not alone anymore." For the first time in days, Zartra allowed herself to feel a sense of relief. Ethan was right. She didn't have to face the unknown by herself. She wasn't alone. The realization gave her the strength to finally acknowledge what she had been afraid to admit. She wanted to stay. She wanted to build a life here, with him. "I don't know what the future holds," Zartra said, her voice steady now, "but I want to face it with you. I want to try. Even if it's dangerous, even if it's uncertain." Ethan smiled at her, the warmth in his eyes telling her everything she needed to know. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll figure it out together." The fire crackled softly between them, and for the first time, Zartra felt like she was finally in control of her own life. There were still questions, still uncertainties, but she didn't have to have all the answers. Not anymore. She had a choice now. And that choice was to be with Ethan, to face whatever came next side by side. As the stars began to fill the sky, Zartra and Ethan sat together in silence, their future uncertain, but no longer filled with fear. For the first time in her life, Zartra was ready to embrace the unknown, knowing that whatever happened, she wouldn't face it alone. Days turned into weeks, and the small camp by the wreckage of Zartra's ship became a place of strange comfort for the alien princess and the human mechanic. With each passing day, the bond between them deepened, though the shadow of what was coming still hung over them both. Zartra had made her choice, to stay with Ethan, to try and build a life together, free from the expectations of her people. But the fear of her mother's wrath, of the powerful Zarthek Empire hunting her down, never left her. She spent her days with Ethan, learning about Earth and its strange ways. She had always thought of humans as weak, but as she observed him, how he worked, how he cared for others, how he saw the world, she realized just how wrong she had been. Humans weren't weak. They were resilient, adaptable, and capable of far more than she had ever imagined. But no matter how hard they tried to move forward, Zartra knew that she couldn't ignore the truth. Her mother, Queen Velnara, would come. The moment she learned that Zartra was still alive, she would send a search party. And when they found her, there would be no turning back. Zartra would be forced to face her people, to return to the life she had left behind. One evening, as the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, Ethan looked at Zartra, his face serious. He had known this moment was coming, but the weight of it still hit him hard. "We need to talk," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I've been thinking about what happens when they come for you." Zartra stiffened, her thoughts immediately turning to her people. "You don't have to worry about that," she said quickly, her voice more defensive than she intended. "I can handle it. I've always been able to handle it." Ethan shook his head. "It's not about handling it. It's about what happens next. If they find you, they're not just going to take you back. They'll want to make an example of you. They'll punish you for leaving." Zartra's heart tightened at the thought. She had been raised to believe that failure would bring punishment, that her worth was tied to her ability to follow the rules of her people. She had known, deep down, that her mother would never forgive her for running away. But hearing it from Ethan made it all the more real. "I don't care what they do to me," Zartra said, her voice shaky with emotion. "I won't go back. I won't go back to that life." Ethan's expression softened. He moved closer to her, his hand gently resting on hers. "I don't want you to go back either," he said quietly. "But we can't hide forever. Eventually they'll find us. And when they do, we need a plan." Zartra looked at him, her mind racing. She had never allowed herself to think beyond her survival. She had always believed that she was bound by duty, that her path was already decided for her. But now, standing beside Ethan, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way to stop her people from taking her back. Maybe there was a chance for her to stay here, on this planet, with the human who had changed everything. "What kind of plan?" she asked, her voice full of uncertainty. Ethan thought for a moment, his gaze drifting to the distant hills. "I'm not sure yet," he said slowly. "But maybe we can make them understand. Maybe we can show them that you don't belong to them, that you have a right to choose your own life." Zartra's heart skipped a beat. The idea seemed impossible. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Ethan was right. She wasn't just some pawn in a game between rulers. She wasn't just a tool for her mother's ambition. She was a person, with her own hopes, dreams, and desires. "But how do we make them understand?" Zartra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do we make my mother see that I'm not her property?" Ethan's hand squeezed hers gently. "We show them that you've changed, that you're not the same person you were when you left. We stand up for what you want, and we stand together." Zartra felt a surge of emotion. She had never considered the possibility of standing up to her people, to her mother. But now, with Ethan beside her, the thought didn't seem as impossible as it once had. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to change the future. Maybe she didn't have to be defined by the past. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," Zartra said, her voice filled with doubt. "What if they never accept me? What if I fail again?" Ethan's eyes were steady as he looked at her. "You're stronger than you think," he said firmly. "And no matter what happens, I'll be with you. We'll face it together." Zartra took a deep breath, her mind whirling with the possibilities. She had never imagined that her future could be something she chose. She had always been trapped by the rules of her people, by the expectations of her mother. But now, with Ethan beside her, she felt a sense of hope that she had never known before. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what would happen when her people came. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face it. "I'll do it," she said quietly, her voice full of determination. "I'll stand up for myself, for what I want." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "That's the spirit," he said, his voice warm. As they sat together, the fire crackling beside them, Zartra felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she was ready to face it, whatever it might be. She had made her choice, and with Ethan by her side, she knew she wasn't alone. The road ahead would be difficult, The dangers were real. But Zartra was no longer afraid. Whatever happened next, she knew she would face it with strength, courage, and the knowledge that she had the power to choose her own path.